Welcome to the EMEA Recruitment Podcast in partnership with Operation Smile. We're proud to support Operation Smile in its mission to provide free surgery to children suffering with cleft lip and palate. Find out how you can help at emearecruitment.com/operation-smile. In this episode, we welcome Lou Corapi, CFO of Gulf Cryo in Dubai. He explains why we should stay open to new opportunities in our careers.
So hello everybody, welcome to the next episode of the EMEA Recruitment Podcast in partnership with our good friends over at Operation Smile. As my colleague Rose has mentioned, we're delighted to welcome Lou Corapi onto the podcast today. So hopefully you can hear me okay today.
Loud and clear.
Perfect. So before we kickstart everything, whereabouts do we find you today, Lou?
This is winter break, actually. So we're down in Barcelona for a week with the kids to get a little bit of sun, a little bit of warmth.
Excellent. That sounds like a good break to have. And as you say, a nice change of weather and scenery from Switzerland to Barcelona is always a nice thing to do and spend a good time with the family at this time of year.
Absolutely. This is sort of a second home for us. I had an assignment over here many years ago with GE, and this is where I met my wife, and we got married, and our daughter was born. So whenever we can get back, it's a little bit like coming back home again.
Oh, nice. That's excellent. Well, no, I hope you have a great week off, and delighted you managed to squeeze us into your holiday schedule. So hopefully we can make sure it's time well spent for you, and we don't keep you too long away from your family today.
No problem.
Cool. So I know, as I mentioned earlier, the show is in partnership with Operation Smile, and for anyone who is not aware of the great work these guys do, they provide help and support to children born in developing countries with cleft lip and palate issues. And given that their name is Operation Smile, and we always like to start the show on a fairly light-hearted vein, so I thought I'd ask you what the last thing that made you smile, Lou.
So I knew this one was coming. I've listened to a number of these podcasts, Bob. There's little things that make me smile every day. Really, last night before I went to bed, my dad called. We've had this ongoing game of Scrabble. Play one turn every day, kind of on our phones, and I happened to win on the absolute last turn yesterday. And it's just as often that he wins on the last turn, but it was nice. It made me smile that my phone rang seconds after submitting that word. There's lots of little things like that. Over the weekend, we heard from our daughter. She's in a performance at her university, and she was so excited at how well the show went. And after all the weeks of practice and effort and time that she's put in, that made me smile. I've been trying to learn guitar a little bit. And a couple of weeks back, I set the amp to Tom Morello, and I hit a power chord just right. And to hear my son, who was up in the kitchen, go, "Wow," that made me smile. So there's lots of little things day by day, I would say.
Well, that's great. I mean, it's interesting because a lot of the examples you've given there, that they center around your friends and family, and I think it's one of those things that the challenges we've had in the last few years with COVID, it has changed, I think, people's perception of where they should try and spend their time and so on. I mean, so given what we've been through recently, I mean, do you think that your approach to work-life balance and time with friends and family has changed over the whole COVID period?
A bit, I would say. I would tell you that work-life balance and staying connected with people has definitely been an area that I need to do better at. It's my New Year's resolution for this year was actually to try to do a better job maintaining those connections. And I think in my career we've moved around a lot. I'm from Boston in the U.S. I thought I would really never leave, and it's kind of been the opposite of that in reality. We've lived in Singapore and in Australia, different parts of Europe, different parts of the U.S. And while it's been fantastic in many respects, the different cultures that we've got to experience, different jobs that I've had the opportunity to have, and different schools the kids have gotten to attend and so forth, staying connected has been a challenge, I think, for me throughout because of that. I think I've gotten good at relying on technology. It was Skype for a long time. Now it's FaceTime or Zoom. It's great, things like Scrabble that I can play online with my parents to have a little, few seconds every day where we're at least connected, if not longer. but I think we certainly appreciate it more. This period of time where we were all kind of locked inside, unable to go out, unable to do cultural things, unable to even just see people. It did strike me, and how nice it was when some of the restrictions eased and we could get back out again. And still we're not doing all the things we would have done before. We ventured out to some restaurants and things like that, but we haven't ventured out to any types of shows and so forth. And I do miss those types of things. And then when it comes to family and when it comes to friends, trying to be, I guess in some respect now, being so used to being on Zoom, knowing that people are home, perhaps have gotten a little bit better at, just sending somebody a quick message or calling somebody, which I probably wouldn't have done in the past, just kind of assuming in the past everybody was busy.
I mean, it's interesting because within that, you mentioned the amount that you traveled, let's say, over your lifetime in your career. You mentioned there from Boston in the US originally, but you spent time working across a large part of the US, obviously Switzerland, and the Netherlands as well. And what do you think that experience of experiencing these different cultures and working with all of these different people from around the globe? What do you think it's given you? Would you say? I thought growing up, I knew everything.
A brash kid, did okay in school and thought, I understand how things work. You don't know what you don't know. And I think that's a big part of it, getting out there, just seeing other ideas, even experiencing things like other foods, other types of music. All of that just enriches us, I think. I have a lot more appreciation. Maybe it expresses itself in empathy when you think about work and just the different types of experiences that people have had, and the different, it puts a different value, I suppose, on how those different experiences can help. How we can solve problems in different ways, how we can look at questions in unique ways. How there's not really one best way to get something done. Very often there's lots of solutions that are all very valid solutions, and it comes down to more around the commitment and how well something can be communicated in terms of its effectiveness being implemented versus finding the one way of trying to get something done. I think I've probably learned to be a lot more patient. I think I've learned to express myself hopefully a little bit more clearly, to speak a little bit slower sometimes, and really just to appreciate people a lot more than I think I would have otherwise. Those cultural differences are interesting. They're fascinating. The histories, I've always been a little bit of a history buff, and to kind of hear about things from somebody else's perspective, kind of understand what makes them unique or their country unique. It's been a fascinating journey, honestly.
And it's interesting because a lot of what you mentioned now is echoes through the recommendations I see you have on LinkedIn. There's a bit of a common theme with these people and what they're saying about you as being a great leader, someone who's very empathetic, strong in communication, listening, and so on. And these are all skills that I think everybody would agree are traits of a great leader, but they're not skills that everybody finds easy to bring into their daily life, especially when you have stressful periods, which everybody does. I mean, do you think that the travel has been, quite a center point as to shape your personality and to shape your leadership style then?
Yeah, and the opportunity to have lived in these places. I was really fortunate that for a number of different jobs, I was, not home for years, to be quite honest. So my wife and I got married. We lived out of a suitcase for the first 3 years, and our kids were all born in different countries, and they were sometimes we were there for a month or 3 months or 4 months, sometimes for a year or a couple of years. But that opportunity to really be present in a place, not just kind of popping in and out. Business trips, you show up, you go to the hotel and the office, and the highlight of the trip might be a dinner, or a meeting. You don't really get the opportunity to experience a place, even though you've maybe been there dozens of times. So I've had the opportunity to really live in a place and take in a place. I think that's what was really special for us. And maybe somewhat unique, certainly not something that we had envisioned or had foreseen or even planned on. It's just sort of something that happened. We've always tried to stay open to, wherever that next opportunity, wherever that need was. And, once you move once, you realize it's not so tough. You can do it a second time and a third time. Those opportunities keep presenting themselves in our case. So we're really fortunate that way.
Well, you mentioned about, keeping an open mind and, let's say, taking advantage of opportunities as they come around. And the question I usually like to ask people on the podcast is actually how they got into their chosen discipline in the first place, because it is often the case that the career chooses the person rather than the person choosing the career. So, clearly, your career path has been really successful, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But what was the reason that you went into finance in the first place, and how did you take that first step, really?
Maybe it was a little bit of a process of elimination. In the U.S., the liberal arts university education is a really popular path. And I knew I didn't want to be a doctor. I didn't want to be a lawyer. Business seemed like a good option. It didn't even occur to me, quite honest, to be an engineer, which maybe if I were to do things over, some of those skills would be really useful to have and exciting to have. But I was interested to go to Boston College. My parents had gone there, and since then, my sisters and cousins, there's a lot of us that have been there, and they've got a really good business school. So that just sort of seemed like the place to go and the thing to do. And so that was it. It was a process of elimination from other things. My dad was a banker, so I knew I wanted to, I had an interest in finance. I knew I didn't want to be in banking. And I majored in finance and in economics. And honestly, it was the economics side of things, which was really interesting, that the different way of asking questions. This was at the beginning of kind of the fusion of sociology and economics coming together and doing perhaps a little bit better job than just economic theory on its own of explaining motivations and reasons why. And I thought that was just such an interesting way to look at questions, to try to connect maybe things that don't obviously go together, to try to understand what really the drivers and influences were of something. And I found, as I started in my career in finance, that, that's what finance was. Where did people make money, or where did businesses make money? Where did they not make money? How do you weigh different decisions? How do you communicate that then, back out to people that are taking actions across the business? Finance was a good opportunity to really be involved so much in so many different aspects of the business. I love how broad finance can be. And I also love how you can take those finance skills and apply them in so many different business models. I learned that in GE, where, one day we were, in a business that was making, controls for, industrial machinery. And then you could be in NBC, or you could be over in aviation, or you could be in a capital business. But from a finance perspective, the questions that you asked and the way that you went about, doing the job, doing the data, was handling the data was very similar. And that was pretty exciting to me, that skill set could be so transferable in so many different ways. So I think I got pretty lucky to have ended up in finance, and it's been a really interesting career because it is so broadly applicable.
Hi everybody, it's Paul Thomas here. I hope that you're well and you're enjoying the podcast so far. Thank you once again for your continued support listening to the podcast. I just wanted to break into the recording to talk to you about a really exciting partnership that EMEA Recruitment has along with Operation Smile. And as founder of EMEA Recruitment, it's an honour and a privilege to announce this partnership. Personally, I was born with a cleft lip and palate, so the mission of Operation Smile is something that I have a strong personal connection with. It's not an understatement to say that the dentists and surgeons that helped me were life changers. It's not only about the actual operations that take place, the support and care post and pre-operation are beyond value, and from personal experience I can only say that I'd not be the confident, happy person I am today without this support. I want to help children experience the support and care and skill that I experienced on my journey, and hope that we can do this along with Operation Smile. Every 3 minutes, a child is born with a cleft lip or cleft palate, and the mission of Operation Smile is to provide help and support to these children through providing 6,000 medical volunteers across 80 countries who are dedicated to help these children with facial conditions, most commonly cleft lip and cleft palate. More than 200,000 children are born with a cleft every year, and they are often unable to speak, eat, socialise or even smile. However, it can take as little as 45 minutes and cost just €180 or 182 francs for Operation Smile to provide the child with life-changing surgery. Now, in partnership with Operation Smile, EMEA Recruitment is raising valuable funds and aiming to create 100 new smiles to support the organisation to provide free surgeries for children and young adults all over the world. Please help us by donating through the link in the bio or get in touch to see how your company can help get involved too. For the moment, I'll leave you to carry on listening to the rest of the podcast, but if there's anything I can do in terms of answering any questions or finding out how you can help and support EMEA Recruitment and Operation Smile, then please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you once again and enjoy the rest of the podcast.
No, you mentioned there that it's been exciting and enjoyable for you, and I think that's often at the core of anybody who finds success in a particular career path, that ultimately they've got to enjoy it because it's not all plain sailing. There's always going to be times where it's tough, and if you don't enjoy the job you're doing or the discipline you're in, then it makes life a lot harder as well. And I think within that, you also mentioned about your time at GE, and then I know you obviously spent just over 12 years at GE, and then joined them on the rotation program, which certainly at that point in time was almost the gold standard of finance professionals going into GE, getting the exposure to different parts of finance, different countries, and there's so many great people that have come out of that rotation program over the years. And I mean, I think, obviously one part of it is a lot about mindset, because I mean, it does look great on the CV to say you've had a number of years in a company like GE, but it's never, you'd never say it's easy to work there, because you've got to work very hard, you've got to put in the hours, and you've got to really push yourself probably out of your comfort zone quite a bit. And I mean, how did you find that whole experience with GE?
I loved it. I really did. It was hard. There were times early in my career where I can remember going to work on Wednesday and coming home on Saturday. And I don't wish that type of work-life balance on anybody anymore. But even as hard as something like that was, I loved it. I loved it because, it felt like, we were doing something. I was learning something. I was contributing something. I loved that it was challenging, that it was hard. For me, that was pretty exciting. I felt like I had limitless opportunities. I joined GE actually when I was still in university. They were the first company that came on campus. They were interviewing for internships, the summer before my final year. And I had an offer to intern, before even the second company came on campus. So it was something that, of course I'd go, work for GE. And to be honest, I didn't know a whole lot about who they were or what the program was at that time. But they sent me down to the western part of Virginia. I was responsible for sheet metal and cost accounting for the sheet metal section of this particular factory that we were in. And even as an undergraduate, I felt like, wow, I'm really doing something that makes a difference here. I'm really learning something as I go. It was natural to come back on graduation and join that financial management program. And every 6 months that job changed. I spent some time in accounts payable after that, which, wasn't the most exciting job perhaps at the time, but, 20 years later, when we were outsourcing some of our accounts payable work in Xylem, it was good to be able to draw upon those experiences and know exactly what the processes were and how those transactions worked and should work. GE rotated me around to Connecticut. I got my first assignment actually over in Barcelona while I was still on that program. I didn't even have a passport before that. It hadn't even occurred to me that would be something that I would need from a working perspective. So it really opened my eyes. And it took the classroom learning that I had done in school, but it really added to that, the real world type of learning, right? Real situations. And even as a very young person coming in, you get exposed to some pretty senior leaders, very quickly. You get to see how they think. And quite honestly, as somebody, was moving around a lot, was kind of disconnected from friends and family. Working a lot was okay. I didn't have a whole lot else to do, I suppose. And I think I realized pretty early on that, the people that are there in the evening sometimes, or, come in on a weekend, that's sometimes when the really important things are getting done. Nobody's there because they want to be there. They're there because they need you, because there's something that's pressing, that's getting done. And if you're around, you have the opportunity to contribute in that, to learn from what's going on. And it was pretty invaluable experience to me as a young person getting started. Now I've tried, really hard in my career to make, work-life balance a whole lot better than that. But I wouldn't go back and change too much. I really think I learned a lot. I think I grew a lot through those experiences.
No, I think, you mentioned the work-life balance a few times there, and I think time's different now. I mean, certainly that kind of time at GE and not just GE, but in most companies, I think if you mentioned any kind of work-life balance, even in an interview, you almost rejected for thinking, well, this was not committed. Whereas now, actually, it's seen as the right thing and the done thing to do to try and get these values aligned with people's lives and time in business. But at that particular time, it was very different, and it was expected almost that you were going to put the hours in and work hard. But you've got the benefits of it through your career as a result, and the type of leader that people say you are is probably largely down to the fact that you were able to experience all these different parts of finance. So you've got the empathy for some of the challenges that they're going through, like in AP, for example. There's not many VPs of finance who've had much exposure to doing an AP job at some point in their lives, and so to have that experience, it does help with the management side of things, really, I guess.
I think so. You're right.
So, I mean, if we fast forward to the present day, obviously you've recently been the VP of Finance at Xylem, and you've had a good number of years, successful years there. I mean, what did it feel like to be in that position? I mean, did you ever feel like you've sort of made it? Now you've got the GE background, and then the progressive career at Xylem after that to get to this level. Do you think, okay, this is where I always wanted to be, and I've sort of made it now?
I wouldn't say made it necessarily. Made it to me signifies maybe an end to something, and I think I'm very much still on the journey. I don't know where the end is going to be just yet, but I certainly would say I've loved this position that I've had in Xylem. A number of positions, like I said, I had 5 or 6 roles in the 11 or so years that I've been with Xylem, and most recently with, leading the water infrastructure and the Europe commercial team businesses from a finance perspective. It's a great position, and it's a great company. I like how big it is. It's $2.7 billion kind of under my responsibility. So that means somewhere in that portfolio, there's always something that's going well that we can celebrate. There's always some good ideas and inspiration that are out there, but there's always challenges as well. And that, something that needs attention, something that, raises everyone's sense of urgency that we need to focus on. I've appreciated that. We're a manufacturing business. My GE time, I had experience in capital businesses, manufacturing, industrial businesses, and I would say I've certainly gravitated more to the industrial side. I like that here in Xylem, that we've got, especially these days, all kinds of supply chain challenges, inflation challenges, leads to price challenges in the marketplace. It is complex. I love that it's not simple. That the challenges are changing. It keeps me very engaged. It's a big business, like I said, in terms of people too. The finance team in Europe is about 230 people. Overall, I think there's about 4,500 employees in Europe, and a lot more when you start to think about all the teams around the globe that we're engaging with. And as the CFO, of course, I have some direct accountability for what we're doing in the finance team, but I also have the license to interact with people across the business all the time. I think that's really a wonderful opportunity. I learned so much, when you're doing your forecast, you're trying to explain how the business is going. Of course, there's an analytical side to all of that, but there's a lot more color to be gained in those conversations that you can have with people. And as CFO, that's a core part of the role, and external as well, with customers or with suppliers and so forth. And the other thing I'd say that I really like about what we're doing at Xylem is we're trying to make the world a little bit better. You go to work every day, you put so much of your energy, so much of your time and your passion into work. I like that what we're doing is to bring water, clean water, safe water to people around the world. It's nice that all that energy is to do something which is going to make the world a little bit better.
No, and I think you mentioned within there, and in some of the other answers as well, the the business partnering aspects, if you like, of finance, with dealing with different people, different backgrounds, different cultures, disciplines, and so on. And I guess that was one of the things, I guess going back to the GE program, it was ahead of its time on that side, really moving the finance discipline from being seen as a numbers related area to business partnering, and the value that finance people can add to the company as a whole. I mean, do you think that was one of the biggest challenges you faced in your career, moving from that sort of traditional finance model to actually going out to be a business partner across all these different parts of an organization? Would you highlight that as something that was a big challenge for you?
I think adopting to what was ITT and then Xylem, and the role that finance played there versus the role that we played at GE, that was absolutely a challenge. GE, I didn't know better. We talked about the finance person, CFO, as the COO of the company. It was taken for granted that we were operational, that we were sitting there with the functional leaders or the sales leaders or whatever group that we supported, and we were engaged with them on a strategic basis, on a communications basis, and so forth. Only when I left GE and came into ITT did I realize that wasn't the model everywhere. And I think that helped me to be very successful in ITT and in Xylem. That I was never going to be that finance person who would just report on how things went at the end of the month. And at the time that I joined, there was a lot of that in the finance organization, I found. And what I was able to do was work with my team and shape our processes so that we could add a lot more value, so that we could be a lot more forward thinking, that we could be a lot more strategic, that we could show the value of having that finance person be with you when you visit a site or visit a customer, versus just the GM or the president going off and doing those activities by himself or by herself. I think that's the mode now that we've tried to operate in across the finance team here in water infrastructure and in Europe, and I think across the company. And it is something surely that you see in many other companies. I've only worked at GE and Xylem, so I don't have a lot of firsthand experience to compare to, but going to some of these CFO forums or seeing things that are posted on LinkedIn and so forth, it definitely seems like that's the mode for the future. And I think that's great. If we think about big data and AI and some of these things coming in, the transactional part of what we do, the spreadsheet part of what we do in finance, that's going to change in a big way. I would say even my career path, having started in cost accounting for sheet metal, moving into accounts payable before moving into FP&A, I don't know that career path exists for the future. I doubt that there's going to be many people for many more years that are going to be doing some of the accounts payable activities that I did. There's certainly not going to be people anymore that are going in and programming the reports, the cost accounting reports that I started off with. You'd program in the morning when we got there, and at lunchtime they would spit out. And if you did something wrong, you'd have to reprogram the report and wait 3 or 4 more hours for it to spit out of the printer again. That's not the way we work anymore, and that's fantastic. Now as finance people, we'll get to take those insights, and really get to some higher level analysis, some deeper thinking, to be a lot more strategic with that data. And it doesn't have to be so hard to get to that. I think that's really a wonderful thing. And this idea of finance around the business partners, around being the communicators, that's, I think, really where the future is. And that's the parts of the job that I enjoy the most. And I think, as you talk to people, I think you'll find that's very common.
No, that's it. I mean, I think you mentioned about the changing face of finance over the years, and clearly, the BI and data and analytics is going to be a big part of the future of finance as well. And I was sort of wondering, from that point of view, I mean, if you were, let's say, starting your career again, and you you knew that BI and data and analytics was going to be a big part of it. I mean, how would you sort of start on the learning curve around that? Because I guess one of the things we like to do on the podcast as well is to offer insights and advice to people who are maybe looking to emulate what you've done, Lou. But obviously, when you started, the world was different, and now you have BI and data as a big part of the future of companies and our personal lives as well. So, I mean, is there any advice maybe you'll give to people who are, let's say, fairly early on in their career, looking to become a VP of finance someday, but in the knowledge that BI and data is going to be much more part of that journey than maybe what it was when you started out.
When I started out, I can remember learning how to write macros, and being able to go into Excel and put my macros so that I could sift through data quickly and I could organize my data quickly. And I really felt like I'd accomplished something. And, I'm very proud of some of those macros from way back when. I suppose for young people today that are getting started, that's probably not macros anymore, right? It's having a little bit of programming knowledge, right? You'll find the folks like me in the business, it's tough to get our arms around all of that data, to be able to sort it quickly and to be able to visualize it and present it. I think somebody that has that skill set where they can not be overwhelmed by all of that data, but they can bring it together. I think you need to have a little bit of a statistics background and probability, right? We don't need to have complete populations of data to be able to draw conclusions, but it needs to be statistically relevant. You need to be able to show mathematically, with some of these things, why that's the case, right? What variables are the most important, most significant? So I think somebody's ability to do those things is going to be good. As we think about robotics, somebody's ability from a programming perspective to maintain some of those robots, to explain what it is that they're going to do, and then especially to be able to improve them, make them more efficient, make them take on more processes. That's going to differentiate people, I think, and that's going to give them, more and more opportunities. I would say absolutely get involved in some projects. In my career, 70%, I suppose, of the learning has been stuff that we've done on the job, responsibilities that I've had on the job, and probably 5 or 10% has come through classrooms. But the balance comes through projects. And that's where you get to work on these cross-functional teams. It's where you get exposure to people that are in very senior positions across the enterprise. And those, going back to what we were saying a few minutes ago, it's some of those skills on communication, presentation that are, as CFO, honestly, the skills I draw upon a lot more than my core finance skills. So to get opportunities to develop those early in your career, I think that's where some of these projects come in. I think that would be, stuff that I probably didn't do enough of, or that I wish I had done more of.
No, but it's interesting. I mean, I think you mentioned that trying to learn new things and keep pushing forward, and you see over someone's career that's if they're always looking to improve and challenge themselves, and then that usually follows in their career path as well. And I mean, we see, with yourself, I know you've been heavily involved in some projects at Xylem, like with the diversity and inclusion program. But again, it's a good example of, say 20 years ago, a finance person being involved in diversity and inclusion would probably it's unlikely there would have been even diversity and inclusion programs back then. But it's actually just getting involved in these projects that help to build relationships across the business and to get that communication and business partnering going, really, I guess.
Yeah, and I think too, I mean, we're so much more than just the hard skills that we might bring into our role, right? People's interests are varied and diverse. Their passions are, and we really want to bring that to where we want to show people who we are, I think. So over the last couple of years, we started some councils, one on diversity and inclusion, one on sustainability, one on health and safety. And then we've had kind of a social program called Watermark at Xylem for a number of years. And, one of our goals in the finance team in Europe was to really to get people to think about and to feel like they belong to a big team, not a bunch of small little teams with a country focus, but they were part of this big finance organization. And so having some of those councils in place, and some of them I helped to champion, some of them, the different people on the team themselves started up. That gives an opportunity for people to connect who might not ordinarily work together in their roles, right? And share ideas and start to build a little bit of their network. And that could help them, some of those projects that we talked about, or when job openings pop up in the future. But it builds these connections across the organization, and it starts to feel like you're part of something that's bigger. It's great to see how people really make a difference. We talked about work-life balance earlier too, and I think we've made a lot of headway over the last couple of years. I think that's coming from, these ideas that these councils are bringing forward. It's employees themselves. It's just saying, here's what would make a difference to me. This past year, we implemented a program of no meetings from 1 p.m. Friday until 10 a.m. Monday. I got a lot of really good, appreciation from people to say that made a difference. That's really helped. I felt even for myself what a difference that made. It wasn't my idea. The team came up with that, said, hey, let's do it, and other ideas that they put forth. The same, diversity and inclusion that you were bringing up. There's a lot of great initiatives that are happening at a corporate level, that are happening at a country level. But we felt, within finance, well, our processes are a little bit outside some of the country things. And so, corporate's really far away in New York. So what are the things that we want to do? How can we look at this? How can we measure it for ourselves? And so, we had some events over the course of the year that were more tailored to how we might feel in finance, or tailored to our finance team. We're a very engineering heavy company at Xylem. And in many of our teams, there's many more men than there are women. In finance, we're much more balanced. We have slightly more women than we had men. So some of the big initiatives that are going on maybe didn't apply so much for us, but there's other things that we can do better from a diversity and inclusion standpoint. And so we wanted to make sure that we were addressing those things that were going to make the biggest difference to us as a finance team. Honestly, all of these things too, while I think we're making a difference with them and we're engaging people, it's also just a way to have some fun. I think the finance folks in GE and Xylem, oftentimes they're the first people in the door and the last people to go home. We don't have enough fun, I would say, in our work. And I think these types of activities and councils, they are a way to have fun. It's different than the numbers grind, the closing grind that we would go through every month. I think I enjoyed. I think the team enjoyed certainly having a little bit that change of pace.
Yeah, no, and I think it's what you're saying there as well. It's aligned to successful business models that you tend to see. I mean, if you have a model set up where you've got a culture that allows people to thrive, taking their own responsibility, but also allows people to make mistakes and learn from them rather than overmanage or micromanage individuals, then ultimately it goes hand in hand with the team enjoying their job more, having more fun, and often clearly the productivity increases as a result of that, and ultimately your job as a leader gets a little bit easier because all the team are going in the right direction, and at the very least they're enjoying the job, which makes things very very enjoyable and satisfying for everybody involved. But obviously it's easier to say than it is to do, but it's great to hear that it's worked, that approach. It just works really well for you, I guess.
I think it has. Yeah, we maybe stop worrying so much about the outcomes that we wanted themselves as ends, right? And just sort of accepted that if we're doing the right things, those outcomes are going to be there. They're going to take care of themselves. Productivity, for example, you mentioned, there was a time when we used to try to measure, how are we doing from a productivity standpoint? How are we doing, number of transactions per person or per hour or what? And they were also, that was hard to do. It was a little bit intimidating, perhaps, creates a little bit of angst across the team. Then I think is a higher evolution of that was to say, what, if we do these other things, right, productivity will be there. Let's not worry about that. So let's measure that we're doing some of these other input things, right? And that does tie into things like, are we having enough fun? Or are we, building that trust? Or are we, creating an organization where people are comfortable to bring forward good ideas that they might have, where they feel like they are empowered to take some risks, where they feel that they have the personal kind of freedom to experiment and try some of these things, where they know that they'll get some recognition if things go well, and we can propagate those good ideas, and they'll be protected if things don't go so well. When you have that type of a culture in place, then you'll get the outcomes that you're after, that they'll take care of themselves. I think we've gotten a lot better at focusing on how we want to be and less worried about what those outcomes are.
No, we're talking about outcomes, and it leads me quite nicely on to one of my final questions, actually, because we talked about your background at GE, at Xylem, the path you've taken to get to where you are today. And obviously, it's always nice to hear what the goals and outcomes you have in mind are for the future. So is there one in particular long-term goal that you've set yourself to achieve, or I guess as well as learning the guitar?
I have a long way to go on the guitar, but having the right setting on the amp definitely makes a good difference. I think, from a work perspective, honestly, I'd like to see us keep moving forward with this work-life balance question. I think we've made a lot of progress over the last couple of years. It's been great to hear people give feedback like, we've talked about this forever, but finally we're doing something about it. I think we're finally figuring out what that might look like and how to get those ideas. So we have a lot more to do on that. So from a work perspective, I think continuing to do that is kind of top of mind. I think from a career perspective, just that continued growth. I don't know, what that next challenge will be, what that next opportunity will be, but I hope that there's something out there where, continue to make a big difference, both for the people that are on the team and in the business and our customers, but hopefully something that connects to a higher purpose, a higher idea, like we do at Xylem with our goal around solvent water. We'll see. I try to stay open-minded, see what those opportunities are. I would never have picked the kind of path that I've been on. So I wouldn't even try to guess at what that future path might look like.
No, I think it's great, an exciting time, and the next step is going to be an interesting one for you. And I think using the time in between roles to travel, spend time with your family. We spoke offline about reading books as well, and you're learning guitar. So you're keeping yourself very, very busy over this period, which is really good to see as well. So I mean, obviously, the fact you managed to sneak in this podcast in between all this stuff is great, and I really appreciate your time doing this when you're on holiday as well. So I mean, I suppose really all that's left for me to say is a huge thanks today, Lou, for the time you spent with us. I know I found it really interesting. I know that a lot of our network will take a lot from it as well. So I just wanted to find out if there's any of our network who want to connect with you personally. What's the best way they can do that?
I think LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to track me down. So Lou Corapi, you've got my spelling and my name in the show notes, I'm sure. But happy to hear from anybody.
Perfect. So no, we'll make sure we add the link to your profile when we post this on LinkedIn as well, so it's easy for people to connect with you. And just a huge thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your holiday in Barcelona.
Thanks, Paul. No, I've enjoyed it as well. You've set a high bar with these podcasts, so I'm glad to participate in it. Thanks.
That's great. Thanks, Lou. Speak to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast episode. If you'd like to reach out to Paul or myself, please feel free to send a connection through on LinkedIn. And if you'd like to listen to previous episodes of the podcast, you can find them all at our website, www.emearecruitment.eu.